Hello and welcome to another episode of Threat Update. I'm Kilian Englert. Joining me again today is Ryan O'Boyle. Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, Kilian. Doing well.
Good to hear. So we have something a little bit different today to talk about. We talk a lot about ransomware and threat actors and investigating it, but there's a new wrinkle in that. So back in October, I believe, and let me throw up on the screen so everyone can see it, the Department of Treasury Office of Foreign Asset Control issued this advisory talking about ransomware payments. So we've seen so many times, so many entities have gotten hit with ransomware, and there are circumstances where you might want to pay. And the Department of Treasury had done an analysis on this and said, well, sometimes you can't, and it might put you in a bit of legal trouble if you do. Now, full disclaimer, Brian and I are not lawyers. We just play them on YouTube. Just kidding. We don't play lawyers on YouTube either. But they talk about that if they've designated certain entities who either create the ransomware or malware or run the bots as basically, well, enemies of the United States to a certain extent, or put them on the sanction list, you could be in trouble if you pay them because you're kind of facilitating these bad actors that the United States has sanctioned at this point. And they talk a little bit about the kind of groups that they do. So specific malware creators, they list a couple as examples in here. So Sam people, WannaCry people, and things like that. And then, of course, other groups kind of linked to known sanctioned entities like North Korea and stuff like that. Any attacker groups like the Lazarus Group, for example. So that puts people kind of at a big disadvantage if they're in a situation where they might have gotten hit and they don't know what to do. They think maybe we need to pay to get back up and running. But what I wanted to ask you, Ryan, because you do a lot of these investigations, is how can you tell? So people, of course, don't want to run afoul of these kind of rulings and these sanctions. But during the midst of a ransomware attack, how would somebody tell if they're dealing with a threat actor from one of these sanctioned places?
It's quite a challenging thing to do. Oftentimes, organizations are able to do this by finding patterns and commonalities and certain attack vectors and certain techniques used. But quite honestly, a lot of times in the middle of a ransomware event, there might be a little bit of panic. It's probably not the easiest thing in the world to do. So, I always work with organizations around how do we prepare for that sort of event? How do we have a plan in place? How do we prepare ahead of time when it comes to understanding our data access, who has access to which data? How do we make sure that we're in an okay spot if we ever were in one of these ransomware incidents? And that allows us to have a little bit less of a panic moment and a little bit more of a hopefully structured response to it. So that's a key thing there. On the other side of things, it's always good to err on the side of caution and engage the proper law enforcement early. Bring the right people in, make sure that you engage federal offices as well, and make sure that you're covering yourselves there.
Absolutely. That's a great point. So it sounds like, nobody plans to be in a situation like this, and we do what we can to try and prevent it, as you said, and kind of prepare for that worst case scenario. So in your experience when preparing organizations for this, are there places or things that they should do or places they should monitor that would help kind of move the detection up the chain, the kill chain, before it gets the kind of ransomware portion or the exfiltration if they're stealing data?
Sure. So, first of all, have the monitoring capabilities in place. That's step one. In order to detect, you need to be able to see it. So at least having some sort of monitoring capability, the more visibility that we have, the better off we are. Starting with the data, because that's typically what's being encrypted. That's always important for us. But then even moving that upstream a little bit, if we can start pulling in some things like perimeter telemetries, DNS events, web proxy traffic, VPN login attempts, where we might see somebody trying to get in or, of course, potentially trying to get out. That allows us to hopefully identify it maybe before ransomware happens, and we can even have a little bit of a better idea around what's happening at scale. So, moving that upstream and having as much monitoring capabilities as possible is definitely, I would say, a key there.
Yeah, and you brought up a great point, too. And in this letter from the Department of Treasury, they did mention, of course, that they evaluate this on a case-by-case basis. So that was one of the recommendations, and I'm glad you brought it up, that you should really involve law enforcement and federal law enforcement as soon as possible, as soon as you think you're under attack, so they can help evaluate this. And that could be a mitigating factor. Should a ransom get paid, for example, and that might put you in a bit of a bind if you're working with them again, we're not lawyers, so this is not legal advice, but that's something they did call out and say, like, yeah, make sure you engage them because it's something that they will take into account. So definitely, kind of a double scary situation, and as if there wasn't enough that organizations had to watch out for, just protecting their data and protecting their organization. Just being mindful that these bad guys are from all over the world potentially, and in places that the United States has sanctions. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Any other advice for our viewers before we hit the road today?
I would say for organizations, don't be afraid to ask for help. Either help preparing, reaching out to your vendors, reaching out to third parties that you might be working with. Try to prepare for these things. And I know here on the Varonis side, especially on the incident response and the forensics teams, we're always here to help. We're here to be a partner, trusted resource. We want to make sure that organizations are set up for success.
That's great. Thanks so much, Ryan. And thank you all for watching. We'll put a link to this document that we're referencing in the description on the video below. Hopefully you found this informative and interesting, and hopefully it wasn't too scary, but definitely something that you need to keep in mind, of course. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to leave us a comment. We always enjoy those. And maybe consider subscribing to the channel. We'll come to you with more videos like this. And thanks for watching, of course. So have a good one. Take care.